His name is Orlando Ferrand. He's an American writer and visual artist of Afro-Cuban and French ancestry. He's published 2 award-winning collections of poetry, City Walker and La Otra Isla, the Spanish edition. The memoir, Apología, Cuban Childhood in My Backpack. He's also published essays and plays. He teaches creative writing and visual arts. Orlando Ferrand.
This is a personal essay, Sea, Ice Cream, and Sex, and it's part of biomythology that I'm currently at work on. So here it is. Like Marcel Proust's Madeleine, there are 3 words for me that have the power to evoke involuntary memories: sea, ice cream, and sex. The words intertwine with the smell of summer and bring me back to the most Byzantine and whimsical time of my life. It was the 1980s, and I was still living in Havana. During weekend escapades at the beach, I discovered what it was like to become a man and experienced my sexuality with both men and women. Give me 1 second. Glasses. I didn't need to define who I was based on my choice of partners or explain to anybody how I could fall in love with both boys and girls. My parents were open-minded and never asked indiscreet questions. My guest and I slept together in my bed, and the next morning my parents would invite her or him to sit at the family table and have breakfast with us all. What is your last name? Do you have relatives of color? Is that your natural hair color? Are you a communist? What do you think of Fidel Castro? Do you have family in the US? My parents would ask these questions with the blinds shut, the curtains drawn, the doors and windows shut. In Cuba, politics was feared more than sexual orientation, in spite of the Castro regime's criminalization of openly gay behavior. One steaming hot Saturday morning in the summer of 1985, we woke to the familiar national alert alarm. Ever since an SR-71 supersonic Blackbird had been spotted in Cuban airspace, what sounded like the screeching of seagulls gone mad had become a part of our lives, telling us to black out our windows. The entire country had been paralyzed for months by a Russian oil shortage, and we barely had any gas, water, or electricity. Perestroika. In Eastern Europe, perestroika meant democracy. In Cuba, it meant hunger and misery. Peering through the blinds, my mother, my sisters, and I saw a crowd running from the marches on the outskirts of the city to the Havana harbor, where the biggest fleet of ships we've ever seen was docking on our shore. The landscape and all the creatures seemed to have been transmuted from Witch's Sabbath, from Goya's black paintings. We couldn't ignore the gut feeling of shared destiny that bonds all countrymen in the midst of adversity. We rushed out onto the streets and became one with the stampede. Out of those ships came millions of Chinese bicycles like a metallic hurricane. They were immediately distributed to every household. We didn't need cars, we had bicycles. Riding my bicycle every day from our home in the Russian housing complex by the sea to the School of Foreign Languages at the University of Havana, in the heart of the city, where I was an English major, and from there to the Kubanacan, the world-class arts conservatory housed in a former country club that I was also attending, exacerbated my stamina and sexual appetite. The famous Cuban ice cream pumping through my veins like milky Viagra was the icing on the cake in those nights where every encounter with a foreigner carried the promise of another anonymous sex partner, soap, toilet paper, and a meal for the entire family. Cuban currency was worth next to nothing. The revolution was starving its own children. and I never felt as proud. I was an A student by day and a hustler by night. Stella, my first love and high school sweetheart, introduced me to the diaries of Anais Nin, with whom I shared the same ethnic background and nationality. We didn't have to live recklessly through the French-Cuban-American goddess of erotica. We were accomplices in one too many adventures in sensuality that didn't make us envy the Delta of Venus. However, Anais became our muse. While Stella read to me all of her literary works, I could fall asleep, aroused, and then released. In 1986, I fell in love with a photograph of the young Ernest Hemingway while on a bicycle trip to his home at Finca La Vigía, 10 miles southeast of Havana City. It was deja vu. I was a junior in college, being formally introduced to the on-site study of his life and work, especially those books he had written in Cuba, For Whom the Bell Tolls and The Old Man and the Sea. Later that day, I recall having seen that same photograph for the first time hanging on a wall in my father's study when I was 8. "Dad, who's that man looking at me?" I asked. "He's one of America's greatest novelists. You'll get to read his work someday when you are older," my father answered. But I wasn't satisfied. "When can I meet him?" "Son," said my dad, shaking his head in disdain, "that's going to be impossible. He's already dead." I bowed my head and walked out of my father's study, overtaken by grief. I realized I had fallen in love with a dead man. Little did I know that the feeling of falling in love with the impossible was soon to become my only indispensable companion. I've always fallen in love with men who've been unavailable or emotionally handicapped, which is a form of death in and of itself, isn't it? But it wasn't Hemingway's love. It was my father's love that I craved and never fully received. He loved his Castro masters more than he loved us. He consecrated his life to a cause in hopes that we were going to have the best possible life. But the best possible life was not to be found in the confinement of a dilapidated island engulfed by an agonizing ideology. It wasn't the Castros, but my Canadian, German, Italian, and Spanish tricks who were putting bread on the table. My parents swallowed their pride. My sisters were too young to comprehend the brutal reality of the average Cuban. As soon as I graduated from college with a double major in English and theater studies in 1990, I found a job as an actor with a well-known theater troupe, and I left Cuba, never to return again. Since then, I've been chasing sunrises and sunsets and even the blue moon that comes out once in a blue moon in the intimate geography of the Bronx on my bike for 25 years, more than half my life now. I've come to believe that the best journeys are the ones we make alone, for only when we can listen to the whispering of silence can we truly tap into the pure fabric of life beyond words, pretenses, expectations, and compromised identities. Our home is not the place where we were born, but the one that gives us a sense of belonging while allowing us to grow up and conquer our own fear of living. Who needs to go back to Cuba when you can have this sea, all the ice cream you can eat, and all the sex to give and to receive as a free act of love and atonement? Thank you.